Mm-hmm.
This hangout is on the air. Oh my god! All right, we're there.
It's like every live hangout begins with people going, "We're live! Oh no, we're live!"
What do we do now? That's awesome. Okay, so we should probably talk about what we're doing. What are we doing?
Yes. We're reading code
We're
just for the
reading.
just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I had a crazy idea the other day. I was like, Soren always says you should have these code reading groups and you should get together and read code. And I haven't done that in a while, and I should do that. And so I went to David and I'm like, you should do that with me.
And I was all over it.
And it
So,
worked. I
yep.
guilted him into it.
Oh, there was no guilt at all. So a lot of people don't know this, but I just started working for the same client that you're currently working for. And I've been reading some of your code, and I've been reading code from other people, and I'm ramping up on a new project right now, and so I'm getting to read a lot of code, and it's code from really smart people, and there's stuff in there that I didn't know, and so yeah, I was about the time you were saying, hey, we should do some code reading. I was like, hey, you should do some code explaining.
Hey, what is this?
There's this thing. That's not even legal Ruby syntax. And then we found out that yes, it is Ruby syntax, and I was like, but it's not in the pickaxe. And you were like, actually, it's on page 340.
But then we were debating whether or not the pickaxe grammar actually explains it well because it's kind of tricky. So
for somebody who sees, and should we get into it or should we just move on? Basically, if you go to the book looking for the explanation, you won't find it. But if you read the book, you will come to understand it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we decided not to read that code on the air because we didn't want to cause people nightmares and things like that. So, plus the confidentiality and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So instead, we found other projects, and Dave let me pick. And so I picked two. I'm going to share my screen here, and I will show what I picked. Share my screen.
I'm going to mute my microphone so that the video, while you're screen sharing, my face won't pop over the top of what we're doing.
We decided to read Dave's face.
Yes. I've got it the wrong way around. I'm going to keep my... Wait, does I keep microphone on, or do I... I'm confused. I don't know how technology works.
I think it's the mic. I think.
Okay.
Okay, so we picked up two projects to read. We may or may not get to both of them. We're going to start with this one, which is Equalizer. And my actual goal is to read the other one, which is Concord. But Equalizer is kind of a heavy dependency of Concord. And they're both pretty small libraries, very simple. We paid attention to Saran and chose some easy stuff to read. And I guess I should just say why I picked these. I'm actually the one that said we should do these. Two reasons. One, Opti said it was cool, and that probably ought to be enough reason for anyone. And two, I've been kind of toying around with the idea of kind of a class builder. So I find myself using these patterns all the time that are just kind of innate for me. And, there are 2 lines in Ruby when I imagine they could be 1 or less or whatever. And so I've been thinking of this concept of a class builder, a way to build classes easier. And that got me to thinking, well, wait, aren't there already things out there that do that? And the answer is yes, there are. And we've talked about rom-rb on Ruby Rogues before, and ROM has this ecosystem of all these little gems that it uses for simple object construction and stuff like that. And these happen to be 2 of them, Equalizer and Concord. So those are the 2 libraries that we picked. I have not looked into these very much at all, at least not recently. I think I maybe skimmed them way back when we talked about ROM. The only step I've taken is I've checked them both out locally from Git. And I literally stopped at Git clone. So that's all I've done.
Cool.
So that's where we are currently. Okay. So shall we dig in?
Yeah, let's go for it. The first thing I noticed about Equalizer is that it's written by Dan Cub.
Right, and that was also the rom-rb project in general, I think, is very cool, and I wanted to read code by people I think are very cool. So that was another just plus in picking them.
Awesome.
Let's see. So as I said,
the video is going to have infinite D Brady's in it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know it's doing that because I did that. So as I said, I checked
horrifying.
Both out. I'm just going to move into Equalizer here. We'll start there since it's the dependency, and this is the this is all I know about Equalizer, basically what's in here. So where should we start? I'm gonna open it up and see if I can see what I can get going. I noticed it had a gem file, so I'm going to try to bundle, see if I can run the specs.
Okay.
Wonder if we can get that lucky.
That's actually really an interesting thing, because when somebody hands you a project and says, get started reading on this, where do you start? And
right?
Yeah, running this, seeing if Bert.
Okay, so the specs do not all pass for me.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I have, it looks like, one failure out of the 45 examples. Let's see what that failure might be. Included from false to true. Result should have initially been false but was true. That's interesting. I'm not sure why it's failing. If I don't know. Yeah, so we don't know, but it looks like they are mostly passing.
Yeah, it is of note. I said a second ago that the first thing I noticed that this was written by Dan Cubb. The second thing I noticed is that if you look at it on GitHub, Dan's included all of the badges for it, and it does actually say the build is failing and its dependencies are out of date.
Aha!
So
okay, so it looks like there is something going wrong with the build currently, and we could probably go back to a safer version if we wanted to. But what the heck? We'll read and see what we run into.
Yeah, this project, the idea that Saran proposed was that the code should be simple enough that you could read it easily and quickly. And she actually said like 100 lines of code.
Right. I didn't actually check how many it is, but it is a small project.
Yeah. So
this it looks like it has some slow example information in it. Actually, what I wanted to see, another idea I had was if I could run RSpec on it directly, which it appears I can with the same result, then I can ask for the doc formatter, and that gives me covered by the test. So Equalizer new with no keys should be an instance of Equalizer. Should be frozen, defines hash and inspect, blah, blah, blah. Inspect hash equals when objects are similar, when objects are true. So that gets kind of an interesting list of some things that it does. And of course, probably an even better first step is maybe we should read the README.
Okay, that's just crazy talk.
I know, right?
Actually, so the README is actually a really good place to start, because Dan just says examples, and then he gives a class, and in the first 2 lines of code, all the magic is presented, and you go, that is what this does. Right.
So my understanding of Equalizer, it's basically summed up by this line right here. You include an Equalizer module, which you can see you kind of customize on the way in, which is unusual usage of modules in Ruby unless you're used to reading things like Confident Ruby from Avdi. So we should definitely look into this more. But
that is a good point. I've not seen include and then a call to new. That is very cool.
Yeah, like module new, right? So, so this is include with the Equalizer. It's setting up the fields. My understanding of what Equalizer does is it provides a reasonable notion of equality. And I guess when you think about equality, you may think about something really simple like the equals equals method. But if you look down here, equality in Ruby is actually fairly complicated. You have equal equal, you have hash, the EQL question mark, EQUAL question mark, and all of these mean different things, or can mean different things, maybe is a better way to say it. And that, is this object the same object? Is this object, content equal to another object? If this object is using a hash, should it be the same key or a different key? These are all the concepts covered by these various methods. And Obdi has done a bunch of episodes recently on these on Ruby Tapas. If you haven't seen those, they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
So Equalizer apparently gives you all this stuff for default, and I'm going to assume, because you pass fields into it when you're including it, I assume you're telling it which fields you care about for the purposes of equality.
That would be my suspicion as well.
So in this case, you have a geolocation. It's got a latitude and a longitude, and maybe some other details like maybe a name or the address that you entered into Google or whatever could have other fields. But for purposes of equality, I assume this means these objects are equal if they have the same latitude and longitude. So in this case, A and B do have the same, C does not, A and B test equal, but the last one returns false because they are not the same object, which is what EQUAL tests, and then these are objects that are not equal.
Right.
So this is kind of a shortcut because, defining all these methods, you have to think about all these things. So what does equal equal mean? What does hash mean? What does EQL question mark mean? And Equalizer, I guess, helps you cheat your way through that, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it looks like that's about the extent of the helpfulness in the README, I would say.
Okay. Now, tempted maybe to look at the gem spec, but do you have tree installed?
Tree? Yeah, I think so.
If you run tree, it's very telling.
Oh, really? Let's see. Let me see. Do I have tree? No. Can I get tree? Brew.
Brew install tree.
Brew install. Haha! Fixed just in time.
Excellent.
Let's see. Tree. Right? Okay.
Yep.
So, very telling. How do you mean?
So, the spec directory is half of your vertical visual space.
Yeah, that's a good point, right?
Inside of the lib directory, we have Equalizer and Equalizer/version RB, which is created automatically, but when you say bundle gem to create a new gem,
right?
That means all of the source code is left right in the middle of the tree, one line above spec, and it's just one line long, Equalizer.rb.
Yeah, this is probably the main content of the library right here. We would assume, and then it looks to be fairly well tested, as we can see. So if we go back to those tests, like I did before, this tells us the kind of things that they're looking for, and using my, again, superficial understanding, we can see that equals equals gets quite a bit of attention here, probably being the primary focus. What happens if he's used with another object of the same class, same object, blah, 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 various different scenarios there. And then we can see that it goes on to cover like EQL, hash, inspect. That's nice. I didn't know that it would...
I was surprised by hash.
Hash? Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Well, so... This is one of those areas that in my mind, it's one of those deals where like you sit somebody down and you ask them, okay, what is equals, the triple equals, the EQL question mark and equal question mark, what do they do and how do they interact differently? And honestly, I would have to refer to the pickaxe. I do know just from looking at this source code, that equal question mark, well, and you said it a minute ago too, equal question mark is the one that actually checks the object ID to make sure that they're equivalent.
Right.
I have always stayed away from the hash method because this affects your identity when you get put into a hash object.
Right.
And it totally makes sense for Equalizer to basically. I was pleasantly surprised to see hash being overridden in there.
Yeah.
But hash is one of those methods that, like, I learned about it 7 years ago and went, I probably won't ever need to control how an object goes into a hash, so I'll just bookmark this for research later. And 7 years later, I've never come back around to 7 years, 8 years, yeah. So
I probably would have been surprised by that. Like I said, if I hadn't watched those videos from Avdi recently, and he actually went through and covered like what all these methods do and mean. And so the EQUL question mark, we've already covered. That establishes if two objects are the same, and you generally, shouldn't mess with that. It generally means, is this object exactly the same object as the other one? Equals is more about content and testing that, and then hash and EQL. These two right here. These go together, and they're actually both used by hash. Dave, give me 1 sec. I gotta step away for just a sec. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry. Let's see. Sorry.
No, not a problem.
So anyways, these two methods, you actually have to do both with regard to hashes, because the hash method gives you the number, which ends up getting modulo some number of buckets, and that determines which bucket in the hash you're in. But two objects can end up in the same bucket, and when that happens, EQL is used to determine which one of the objects it is in there. So it actually takes both of these to define your hashing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so hash tells you which bucket you're in, and then EQL distinguishes you from other objects that are in your bucket.
Exactly. Right.
That's cool.
Yep. So that's why a method or a module like this that cares about hash equality would need to define all of those methods, because it actually takes both of them.
Yeah.
All right, so let's open the main file. We've figured out kind of what's involved and what's tested. Let's see if we can get a peek at the big code. And so this is it. This is where we assume everything is defined. Let's look. It's a whopping 123 lines, so it almost passes Saren's test.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Okay, so really interesting. Let's see. So Equalizer inherits from module, and that line would have totally blown my mind if I had not read Confident Ruby.
Yeah.
Because you don't really see people doing this in Ruby. I've never run into it in the wild, I'm pretty sure, before I read Confident Ruby.
Yeah.
So you making a subclass of module lets you do something like, equalizer.new, and you get a constructor as normal, and you can, pass in some stuff that basically changes the behavior of your module. So you get
you're getting a module. Equalizer is a module, but it's a module that has some special behavior to it.
Right.
Or rather, Equalizer is not a module. Equalizer is module. That's grammatically weird, but it's module, but it's module with descendant behavior on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
That is.
now I remember I said earlier that inspect kind of surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I think about it, I actually hope they do something with the expect of the normal module, because this is one thing I don't love about using module new. If you do,
Mm-hmm.
whoops, I have to spell it right. If you do module new like this, see the inspect, it's just some generic module.
Yeah.
And then if you later, mix that into some object dot new and o dot extend
Mm-hmm.
m, and then you look at, oh, how would I see them? Single,
Ancestors.
yeah, I think so. Singleton class ancestors, something like that. Yeah. See, there's my kind of
Mm-hmm.
ugly module in there, which doesn't really
Yeah.
tell me something. So I'm hopeful that Equalizer does something better than that,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't end up with this kind of ugly module.
Yep.
Okay, so initialize looks like it does three things: tuck the keys away,
Mm-hmm.
define some methods, and freeze. So this module will no longer be modified. In ROM, they're pretty good about working with immutable objects. They have a whole nother library about that
Mm-hmm.
called adamantium, I think. So it's common to see things like freeze and stuff because
Okay.
they like to work with immutable
Right.
values.
And that's probably not strictly necessary,
Right.
but for the way they're doing things in ROM, I would guess that that's the protocol there, and it doesn't hurt anything for you to freeze, to create a new module instance and freeze it.
Yeah, to make the module where it's not going to change. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, the keys of the module can't change because otherwise your idea of equality would
Mm-hmm.
change in the middle of the program, and that's probably a very bad thing, right?
Yep.
Okay, so when this module is included, this is a hook in Ruby, which the comment actually
Mm-hmm.
tells you. So when this is included, we go ahead and do whatever the default stuff is
Mm-hmm.
to do, but for the descendant, we module eval include methods. So I assume we're going to see that later.
That's interesting.
So-
I've seen this. I've seen the trick where when you get included, you send, extend to whoever called you,
Right.
and I've always felt that was playing dirty pool, right? When I include something, it should not extend it. But this is not. This is a different thing. This is doing a module. You know what? I don't know what module eval does.
So
I'm gonna be glad
module eval is also known as class eval. So basically, they're reopening whatever class included them,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're doing an include statement to include the methods. So effectively, when you include this module, you also include this module called methods,
Okay.
which I assume we're going to see in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That we should say the reason you usually see the extend trick is to add class methods.
Class methods, right?
Right, because you can't otherwise, add both class methods and
Mm-hmm.
instance methods at the same time, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is interesting. That apparently including this module gets you some other behavior which we haven't got to yet.
Mm-hmm.
Define the equalizer method based on keys. So this is that definition we saw back in initialize here, define
Right.
methods. It looks like it defines a compare method, a hash method, and an inspect.
Mm-hmm.
Define compare. So there's a method called compare question mark. Define a method called compare question mark based on the instance values identified by keys. Compare question mark gets a comparator and an other, and it goes through all the keys and sends them the comparator. So like less than or something, I'm assuming, maybe.
Okay.
And the other key. The other object send key. So, okay, so yeah, this line's pretty tricky actually. So here, this would become a call to like latitude, in the example in the README. So it would be latitude dot send comparator. I'm assuming at this point, but maybe it's like, you know, less than or equal, something like that.
Yeah.
And then other send key latitude. That's my guess at this point. And this will return true if all the keys match that.
Right. And so I'm wondering aloud here where comparator is coming from, and I'm looking at this define method is going to yield it, and I realize now that the arguments. Can you turn on linum mode? LINUM dash mode.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you have songbirds.
And you. Oh yeah, line numbers.
Okay, there we go. So on line 55, when you're defining the method, I'm like, wait, where does comparator and other come from? And the answer is when you call define method, you get to take whatever arguments you want.
Right.
And comparator and other, those are the parameters that the method CMP will take.
Right. Exactly. So okay, so we think this is a general comparison method that basically says if you specify some keys, like, you know, latitude and longitude is the example they started with, and you want to say, is this thing equal to this other thing? It looks like you can call this compare question mark method, which, by the way, is private, so it's going to be called for you, we assume. And it would run through all those keys and basically repeat the comparison with every single key on both sides. So, and it would only return true if all of them were true.
Right.
Yeah. So that looks to be the general comparison method. This is the hash method. And again, this would probably surprise me if I had not been watching Opti's series recently, but
line 68 blew my mind.
Line 68, define hash?
Yeah. I read that as define method hash do or.
Oh yeah, but no, it's just empty.
It's not or. It's empty argument list. That's
empty arguments. Yeah, I don't know why they put that there. I would usually just leave that off.
I would omit that, or I would put a space between them.
Oh, to show? That's a good idea.
To show that this is not
this
logical.
This is not the or operator. I like that idea. Okay, this is the line that would have surprised me, again, if I hadn't seen Abdi show it recently. He said a great way to get your own hash is array responds to hash, and it builds a hash based on its contents. So if you need to build some arbitrary hash value, stuff all the values you care about in an array, and go ahead and stick your class in there too, so that you're typing it to the type you are, and then just call hash on that, and that's a cheap way to implement your own hash.
Cool.
So yeah, this is a hash of all the keys we said we care about, plus whatever class they're on, and hash that, and that'll give us our hash.
Oh, that is cool.
So that's kind of cool. And then here, yes, it does look like they make a pretty inspect. That's what this is right here. Class name, they get the name right here because they go self-class. They use the name and then all of the various keys placed in so that this key equals this value, inspect.
Key equals send, key inspect, yeah.
Yeah, and this shows how freaking cool Ruby is, by the way. I love lines like this. You can see Emacs is not as cool as Ruby. It cannot handle this. But Ruby totally does. You can have double quotes with interpolation inside, with double quotes with interpolation inside, and it's just turtles all the way down. Ruby doesn't care. So.
Wait, is that a double quote? It is a double quote with interpolation inside.
Yeah, right?
Oh. That's like eighth thing that I've learned just from looking at this code.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I would have attacked that with, oh, I'm in double quotes already, so I need backspaces around them or whatever, and you don't. That is cool.
Yeah. Ruby's parser is very clever. Sometimes too clever, which I'm sure we all well know. You know, there's scenarios where you can add a space and suddenly Ruby throws a syntax error. But this is cool. The fact that you can actually use double quotes inside of double quotes is amazing.
Yep.
Okay, then here's that module from way back above. If you remember, it was included right here. So when we include this module, we also get methods, and they are down here. So these are the main methods right here. Equal checks instance of the other, and then does compare with the method. So it calls equal on, so this is interesting. Compare the object with other object for equality. Example, true or false. This will make sure they are the same class, and then it will make sure that it calls that compare method that we saw earlier, passing in the method, which is going to be EQL. So it basically calls EQL on every single argument, every single field that we say is important. And all of those have to match.
Now that's interesting. Underscore, underscore, method, underscore, underscore. That is, I'm guessing, just like file or line, that's going to return the name of the method that you're currently in, right?
Yeah, that's new since about, I think it came in 1.9. I may be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see that they've used underscore, underscore, method in order to avoid duplicating EQL question mark from line 101.
Right. Yeah. If you use, the primary method or advantage to using something like underscore, underscore method is, and it probably doesn't apply in this case when they're defining very specific methods that Ruby counts on, but it is probably a good habit overall, and that's that if you change the name of the method later, you don't have to change the code inside it, right? Or whatever. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. So that compares them, and then here's finally, I think the primary purpose of this module, which is the double equals. So this is interesting. The first thing it does is call coerce if if this class responds to coerce. And if you don't know, again, Avi has some awesome videos on this, but Ruby's math system relies on this concept of coercion. And the reason is because do things like this. You can say, is 0 the same thing as 0.0? And that's really a fancy comparison because, of course, 0 is a fixed num, whereas 0.0 is a float. And so those need to be coerced into the same concept before you can compare them. So under the hood, Ruby did this, coerce 0.0, and came back with this. Well, let's just call them both 0.0 because that's equivalent. And then in this form, they can be compared, and you can tell if they're equivalent or not. And so numbers have to know how to coerce themselves into the various other forms of numbers you can run into. So this kind of equal supports Ruby's coerce system, which I really like that they support it because while that makes it possible for you to do things with numbers, it also means that you could use this on any other classes you use coercion for. So like in Abdi's videos, he's building like feet and meters objects that can coerce themselves to equivalent units of measure so they can be added or whatever. And so that would just work because they followed this Ruby convention.
I'm going to have to go watch that and pay attention for it because I've been playing around with the units gem, which is a fantastic gem that lets you assign it uses like the 7 fundamental SI units, and you can basically you have an array of 7 elements, and you set the dimension using one. You put 1 in the distance column, and that means that you're in unit of distance, and you put -1 in the distance column, and now you're in units of per distance, or per meter, or per foot, or whatever.
Right.
And units falls down. Well, it doesn't fall down, but units isn't particularly elegant, and it's particularly inelegant when you're dealing with 2 units that are equivalent to each other, that have the same that array of dimensionality is the same, but they are like feet and meters. They're not perfectly equivalent.
Oh wow, yeah, that's cool.
So you can define converters for them, but you have to, and yeah, it would be so cool to be able to just say type 3.meters feet and have it know.
Right.
Fixed num.meters is a constructor, and unit.feet is a converter. So.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. So I noticed an interesting thing on line 118 when they do the comparison in equals equals, they use kind of, but on line 102 with EQL question mark, they use instance of, and this is one of those things I always forget until I look it up. But these are not the same.
Oh crap!
Instance of returns true if the object is an instance of the given class. So in this case, B is an instance of A false, B is an instance of B true, B is an instance of C false. So notice that subclasses are not considered instance of compatible, but kind of is the one I use all the time, and that is kind of includes subclasses, right? Turns true if the class of object or if the class is one of the superclasses of object or modules included.
So is-a and kind of are synonymous.
Yes, is-of is the same thing as kind of. I use is-a all the time, but in this case, they have the correct usage here. For the purposes of equality, subclass should be fine, but for the purposes of same key and a hash, remember that's what this means. We probably really want the exact same kind of object, right?
So I have I don't know if you care, but I just sent you a link in the chat. You can throw it in the YouTube show notes.
Yeah, let's go.
To a Stack Overflow of kind of versus instance of versus is-a. Now the.
Oh yeah.
Do you know which one gets involved? I'm pretty sure it's kind of or is-a if you call class dot equals object.
Class dot equals object is I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain.
Okay. So if you have a string, well, we can check this in IRB, can't we?
Yeah, let's check it.
I have object.
What Dave is saying, you can do. We can do something like this. So
object equals foo, the string foo.
Right. This works. I'll just do. We can do fixed num. Whoops! I need 3 equals there. You can test for a class this way, and the reason you can do this is so that in case statements you can put some object in there and include it. So then if we choose a superclass of fixed num like integer, and test that, it's still true. So equals is using is-a or kinda, not instance of.
Right.
Which is different. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. So
I don't know why I'm surprised by this, but I am surprised by how much we just had to learn about equality in order to understand this class.
Right.
Except that is the entire point of this class. If we had not ripped the hood off of this engine, we would not have had to understand all these bits and pieces and go, oh, look, instance of on line 102, but kind of on line 118.
Right. Yeah, that's
cool.
That's kind of impressive in Avdi's series of videos. He's like, let's talk about equality. And it kind of comes up as he's building this one class. And then he the next 5 videos are like a tangent as he goes over all this equality stuff, and it's like, wow, equality is a very complicated concept, that involves a lot of things. Well, what do you mean by equal? And Ruby has an answer for a lot of different kinds of equal. So, and this class is deftly handling those.
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's take a quick look at the specs. I probably would have went straight to the specs if the code had been quite a bit bigger. I'm just going to look in the units, equalizer.
That's a very good point. You ran RSpec with the -fd, which is my favorite way. When I'm trying to understand code, I love running documentation style.
Right.
When I'm trying to just test code with TDD, I like using just the green dots. But when I'm trying to understand, I love using the FD format because it makes the specs tell a story. And I just realized that I did the same thing that you did, which is we hit 2 early code reading tests that we probably have adopted because we're old and curmudgeonly, and that is the specs weren't passing, so we mentally devalued the specs as reading material.
Right.
And source code I pointed out was one file, and then we saw that it was 120 lines, and so those two things combined, we said, oh, we're going to read this code. Oh, specs aren't failing. It's only 120 lines of code. Let's just read the code.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, if I had run into a big wall of code, I'd have been like, oh, I'm scared. Let's go to the specs.
Go to the specs. Why aren't they passing?
Yeah.
I'm not even going to test them. I'm just gonna email Dan. Pull request. I have an issue.
So this is actually kind of cool. I really like this library just already and looking through it because of how many good practices it shows. So this one right here, when they override included, which is the hook that Ruby will call anytime your module is included, they made sure to call super. And that's great because that means if another super class is involved and it has an included method, it will be delegated to. And notice there's a test for that. So, and this may actually be the failing test. So, not sure if this is super great way to handle it. I'm not sure what's wrong here, and I'm not going to dig into it. But still super cool that they have that good habit, and they tested that good habit. And then this is what we figured out manually while reading, that when you include this module, you also get the methods module, and they show that. Other spec, universal spec. So this is, I think, the primary spec. Should be an instance of, should be frozen. Defines hash and inspect methods dynamically. So it checks for those. EQL, and it starts going through scenarios of EQL with, same object, not the same object, kind of things. Equals, the scenarios of those. Hash, the scenarios of those. And then with keys. So this chooses some various keys, I guess. Dynamic class creation here. I find myself doing this all the time when I am testing a module in Ruby. This is probably the easiest way to do it right here. Just make some class with class new, use it however you want to use it, and then you can test your module.
And the advantage to that is that this is actually one of the limitations that all test suites have in Ruby, and that is that, well, unless you're tearing down the entire Ruby interpreter, each time you define a class, it's a constant, and it lingers forever.
Right.
So the first time you build a test double and include that module, it's there forever. And if your tests run in a random order, that's what I was just testing now in a side window, was to see if they had that holdover problem in the failing test, that something previous was including the thing, and that's why it was there in advance. And that turns out not to be the case. They're actually, they've tried that and it didn't work. But by creating a temporary class like this, each time this block is evaluated, you can mix stuff in and then just throw it away. It'll hang around in the Ruby's object interpreter or Ruby's interpreter, I think. I could be wrong about that.
Until it's that's a good question.
Dude, I don't think constants can be.
But
I don't think they can be garbage
this is
collected.
not a constant. This is just a class returned, and it's assigned.
Oh, you're right.
And this let. So no, it can be. I'm pretty sure it can be garbage.
It can be garbage because we are normally when you create a class, you type class equalizer or class pig truck.
Right.
That's the constant. You've declared the constant right there.
Right.
But this is just : class.new.
Right.
And you're right. It's just an instance of class.
If you don't know, the : forces the constant lookup to happen at the top level, no matter what context you're currently in.
Yes.
So because we don't really know where this code runs, it actually runs deep in the bowels of our spec somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if it would be safe to refer to some class constant in there because maybe our spec defines it. If that's the case, it's not really safe. By doing the : they ensure they are getting Ruby's class from the top level, which is what they want. So.
Yep.
And
if these guys are overloading the class constant in their bowels of their gem, I am terrified of them. And Eric and Dan are both smart enough to do that, so this is wise to fear.
So yeah, testing the various scenarios that we would expect. So yeah, it looks like.
That's cool.
Oh, and here's the example of the magic inspect. Look at that. Yeah. So that's the inspect that we saw earlier. It gets mixed into some class that has a named user. I assume that was handled by the stubs. Yep. Stub name and return nil. Ooh, where did user come from? Let's find it. User. Interesting. How did that? Let's go backwards. User. It's up top. There it is. Whew. Yeah. So name is user.
User.
There.
And class is class.new. That is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a really cool bit of code. I'm really glad we read it. This explains a lot of Ruby's equality. Like I said, that series of videos I've watched from Abdi recently is like these 5 mini videos on equality, or you can look at this library because it works through all those. But it is kind of hard to understand why they're doing some things the way they're doing just looking at this code, because they don't, come out and say, well, Ruby considers this method for, hash equality. But you can't up the methods themselves. Alright, so EQL, but we have to get the right one, I guess, from object, probably. Object, EQL.
You need a single quote to... Oh, just dot, okay.
Yeah, just dot. Let's see. Object EQL.
RI forever.
So yeah, this is and look at this. Just in this one method, I kind of got 3 of them, which is, this is not all of the equality in Ruby, but it's some of it. So it talks about here, what does equal equals mean, what does EQL mean, and what does EQUAL. So that's kind of described here. And then remember, there's also, triple equals, which we've already shown a little bit. And it should talk about, when it talks about, right here, when it talks about EQL, it talks about how it relates to hash keys. And the other method related to hash keys is hash. I believe if you look at that one, it will tell you, you probably shouldn't override this without overriding EQL. Functions must have the property that A EQL (B) implies A dot hash equal B dot hash.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
So this gets into all of the various equality and stuff like that. So cool module. How about Dave? You want to lead us through the other ones since I did all the driving this time?
Gosh. No. I'm actually not set up to drive here.
Not set up? Okay. I can do it if you want. Is it hard to get there?
Yeah, you know what? It's not terrible. Give me a minute.
Okay. Go ahead.
Let me.
I'll turn that off.
And it's Concord. Who wrote Concord?
It is mbj/Concord on GitHub. I do not know who MBJ is. I'm gonna look
Is it
that.
Mary Bravo Juliet?
Yep, it's Marcus Sharp. Oh, I know who Marcus is. He writes Mutant, actually, which is that's another cool library we should look at sometime. It's a mutation testing library.
Mm-hmm.
Cool stuff.
Bring this over here.
Okay, so this time we told you that story to tell you this one.
Okay. And I told James that I was going to come into this one blind, so now we get to see that I really wasn't kidding. Let me hang on. I've still got work files open.
Please hold.
Yep. Please hold while we cover up sensitive data.
So the reason you use Equalizer in your code is to get a sane definition of equality by only having to write one line of code.
Uh-huh.
And that includes hash equality, normal equality, and EQUAL already works because the definition and object is what you want, and they're not overwriting it. So that's kind of a cool thing to remember instead of, rolling up your sleeves and being like, oh, I'm going to have to use this thing in a hash. You could just use the equalizer.
Yep. Keep this. Okay, I just turn on display mirroring so that you don't end up with a 4,000 pixel wide screen share.
The code is like 1 pixel in the middle.
Yeah. Which is great if you're writing a ray tracer, but...
Right?
Okay, all right. So let's see if I can... Those are settings. I should know how to do this. Oh, that's capture. Screen share. All right, select a window to share. Oh, I'll just share terminal. That. Actually, no, I'm going to share desktop. Am I successfully sharing at you?
Yes, you are. I see you
Excellent.
seeing me.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. And now I have to sneeze. Oh, have fun editing that out.
Zoom tight.
Thank you. All right. So I just cloned. I just did a git clone, github.com mbj/concord.
Okay.
And I haven't opened anything yet. I'm going to
learn about Concord.
Yep. Okay, so I see a gem file. I'm going to execute the same algorithm, which is I'm going to bundle this bad boy. And I see a spec directory, so we know it's our spec. Well, we think it's our spec.
I usually watch for the gems rolling by to see if our spec pops up in the list.
Yep. I've asked online if you see if you're using Minitest spec, should you put that in spec or in test? And I got back some interesting responses to that.
What was the response?
The general response is that if you have a test directory and you go in there and you find that it's Minitest spec, most people will say people that use RSpec will be pleasantly surprised that they haven't been slammed with test unit.
Right.
People that are big fans of pure Minitest go into test and they see Minitest spec and they go, all right. Conversely, if you go into the spec directory and you find RSpec, well, okay, you know what you're getting, that's fine. But if you go into your spec directory and you find Minitest spec files, Minitest spec does not give a complete, it's not a complete implementation of RSpec, and it's a letdown. It's a principle of least surprise violation, more so than finding Minitest spec in your test directory. So that was a long way around. It's a complicated answer because I didn't get a really clean answer from people writing back. And basically I found a lot of people who didn't care one way or the other. But some RSpec people said I would be a little tweaked on the nose if I looked in the spec directory and found Minitest in there.
Yeah, that's probably a good point.
Yeah.
I noticed in this dependency list there are several gems I like. So other fun gems to go read. REST client is awesome. I've read that one in the past. Ruby progress bar is cool. Some of the code in there I think could use some refactoring, but the way it works is really awesome, and you should go check it out.
You know what I'm going to do so that we can point to things? I'm going to start tmux, and I just lost all of the history that we just had on there. And I also lost the directory that we were in. Awesome. Concord. Here we go. And okay, so then the next thing that you did. Now you'll get a kick out of this. So I use BEX for bundle execute or bundle exec, and I'm trying to get out of the habit of doing that. So I'm going to do bex rspec and get this really annoying. Get out of the habit of using this, Dave. You want BE instead. I have literally disabled the bex command on my computer in order to flick myself on the eyeball whenever this happens. So now we can do BER spec, and we pass. Oh, that was fast! Oh my gosh, did you see how fast I was?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Oh, yeah, you can't. Hang on. Time and it doesn't get along well with aliases, and BE is an alias. 840 milliseconds total, end to end. That's Ruby startup included.
That's awesome.
That is crazy awesome. So, all right. So, my next thing that I would be tempted to do again is to run tree. That's very interesting to me. We've got this very broad config directory. It's got 7 or 8 things in it: Flay, Flog, Mutant, Reek, Rudy, Rubicop. You know what? I'm messing up on a really key element. I have lost my mouse cursor, or I would be clicking on things right now.
Laser pointer. Use your laser pointer.
I really have lost my mouse pointer. And I've lost keyboard control now too.
That's a bad sign.
I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm about to lose this call.
As your computer shuts more and more things down.
I apologize to screw this up on you, but can you... I got nothing. Let me see if I'm on my other computer. I'm running Synergy, and it's talking to 2 other computers. Okay, I am on... Oh, crud. Okay, so I changed monitors, and I think it has confused Synergy. It won't let me out of the other computer.
Huh.
Well, I know one way to make it let me out of that computer. I'm just going to turn that computer off.
The system is going down.
The system is down. And okay, so, and the other thing that I want to do then.
Hey, your mouse is back.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And Synergy is now turned off, so I won't end up going on to other... That was a pretty brutal way to shut down Synergy, but it had it coming. So,
all of those config files that we saw, those are all based around test coverage kind of stuff.
Are they? Oh, yeah. That was the thing that I was about to say, is that you went to... Oh, crap, is it MJB or MBJ? One's a coffee and one is Concord. The README. Uh-oh, build is failing. Now my specs pass, so it works on my
passes
machine.
on your computer.
Yeah. All right, so Concord, with no explanation, it's a library to transform this, and we have class composed object, including equalizer on foo and bar, add a reader, protected foo, add a reader bar, protected bar, definitionalize foo, bar, da, da, da. Okay, into shorter and easier to parse by the eyes, include Concord new, foo, bar. Okay, now here's an interesting thing.
It's the equalizer trick again, right?
It is the equalizer trick again.
Yes.
But we've got these are protected.
Right.
Ah, okay. So including Concord.new on some attributes is going to give you protected attribute readers.
Yes, that's right. And so this is probably a good point to discuss. Why do they have to be protected? It's obvious like they wanted to restrict access to them, but they cannot use private here. How come?
That is a good question. Okay, for starters, because if you use private, if you inherit from this class, you cannot access them.
Right.
Without looking at the code, I do know that Ruby has one gotcha with private, and that is that you cannot send like self.foo if it's private. You can't do that. You can't have anything. You cannot have an explicit receiver for a private message in Ruby. Right. And so I know that that's a gotcha in Ruby. So I'm anticipating seeing that in the code coming up.
But what gets us in this particular case is the first line, or the second line, include equalizer. Remember what equalizer does? It runs through all the attributes, calling the attribute on both sides.
Right.
So the only way that's possible is if those attributes are public or protected.
Or protected.
They cannot be private.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay,
so it's cool because it hides the attributes for you, but Equalizer can still get to them to do all of its great equalizations.
Oh, that's a good point. The other thing that composed object is doing for us is it is including Equalizer.
Right.
For us.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
That's why we had to. That's why we had to start with Equalizer.
Right. Okay. So if I say class composed object and we include, foo and bar, what I'm saying is I'm an object that is composed of foo and bar, and you can construct me given a foo and bar argument, and you can read those with readers, foo and bar.
But only from inside the object or for something of the same type.
Oh, that's true.
They're basically private, right?
That's true. Okay, so we can't publicly read these. That is interesting. And that, again, that probably... I don't see why you shouldn't be able to read those other than the fact that you talked about in ROM that they're using a lot of immutability, and readers are inherently west-facing code, and immutability tends to favor east-facing code.
Right.
So, okay. Then in this particular case, wow. Okay, so I'm still wrapping my head around what composed object gets us. It sets up Equalizer for... You know what it is? It's a factory for Equalizer.
Well, I would say it's a factory for classes. So, and this may be a good point. I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I was looking at all this stuff because I'm kind of interested in class builders right now. And that's what Concord is doing, obviously. But for me, in my case, I always define and initialize. I take some values, I stuff them in instance variables. I define readers for those values.
Yeah.
And then I immediately default those readers to private. And the reason is that most of my readers are just for me. Now, there will be exceptions that I want to be available to the outside world, but I'll eventually switch those to public as I need to. And I default to private. And so Concord interests me because it kind of automates this process that I'm going through in my head of I take these values in, I stuff them as variables, I'll make these private, and on top of it, you get some sane equal behavior when you do it.
Totally makes sense. So we talked about this the other day. I will do, I don't like foo, or we're going to say Microsoft's metasyntactic variables. That, yeah, if widget has foobar and baz, you're absolutely right. I will do
Dave, your sound's cutting it in and out a little. I think Hangouts may be muting you when you type, perhaps.
Ah, that is probably the case.
I think you can shut that setting off, but I can't remember how. Like it pops it up when you're muted or something. I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. Not in settings.
Yeah, I don't see it in there.
Okay, well, I'll try to be careful to not type and talk at the same time.
Okay.
But there's this thing that you and I talked about recently, that I do this pattern all the time, and that is that I'll build a class, I'll write the readers for the attributes, and then I'm going to type here for a second, so I'll shut up. Typing well today, but I will do this all the time and all over the place, where this pattern, if I turn on line-up mode again, lines 2, 3, and 4 set up readers for for these attributes, and yeah, it's the same pattern over and over and over. It's the same 3 symbols come in on line 2, the same 3 variables come in on line 3, and then they are assigned to instance variables on line 4.
Right. So Concord does this with 2 more steps. One, all of the readers default to a semi-restricted access, and Equalizer is thrown into the mix, so you get a sane version of equal.
It would add this. That. So that's what adding Concord to widget would do.
Right.
That is very cool.
Right. It's basically a class factory, right?
Right. A Scratch file, so I don't end up trying to open a pull request.
That was awesome.
Okay, so here are the Concord specs. This is where I would be tempted to dive in next. Without even looking at the source code at this point, I'm now tempted to look at the specs because they pass.
Oh, yeah.
And let's actually turn on documentation mode. Okay, so attribute behavior, equalization behavior, composed objects are equalized on attributes. Visibility should set attribute readers to be protected. Okay, that reads well. The attribute behavior and equalization behavior, I don't quite understand those just yet, but we can circle back to them. When composing too many objects raises an error. With no objects to compose, assigns no instance variables. Concord public should create public adder readers. That's a new usage.
I did not know that. So if you use concord.new, you get the protected readers. If you use concord.public, you get public readers, right?
Mm-hmm. So there's probably a better example of this right here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I bet there will be one in the specs.
Yeah. Let's go look for that. I'm in
that's
a mood
cool
for.
Feature.
So public instance. Come on.
We're kind of looking for Concord : public, maybe?
Yeah.
No, try for just : public, because it'll be defined class : public.
here's where I went wrong. I switched from this version of Emacs running under tmux, which I'm going to kill and is sitting in the Concord directory, to the X Windows version of Emacs, which was still sitting in Equalizer.
Ah, I gotcha.
So, all right. So unit Concord, and there's only one spec file, and it's universal spec. And if I turn on, there's 133 lines of spec, and we'll back
Concord
search.
public, right at the bottom.
Right there.
Right
Look at
there.
that.
Class name include Concord public foo bar, expect object foo to equal foo. So you can have it either way you want. You can have
That's
protected
cool.
attributes, or you can have them public.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Now, this is opinionated.
When composing too many objects, it raises an error. To raise runtime error, composition of more than 3 objects is not allowed. Wow, you're right. Very opinionated.
That is very opinionated.
I think Sandy Metz would like this library.
Yeah. I'm not sure if 3 is the right number, but this is not my library, so I'm just like immediately thinking, are there places where I compose more than 3 things together? And
yeah, there are definitely places where I do, but it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think probably, so this is very interesting. I think probably if I were ever going to throw in a feature with like that, I would give you an override, but I would make sure the key is something like, yes, I know I'm a horrible person, or something
right.
like that.
Or Concord : big fat object.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right? Big Concord : I am probably stupid.
Yeah. But yeah, that is an interesting thing, that it doesn't want you to make these big sweeping classes.
Yeah. That is. See, now I want to have the authors on the show to talk about this class.
Right? Yeah.
So if I do a git blame on, we were just in spec unit Concord universal spec, and yeah, Mark. No, let's see. Oh, there we go. More than 3, and this is from Snoo. Is the last person to. However, it looks like Marcus Sherp may have. Oh, Marcus Sherp added the specify to it, so I don't know what the history on this is.
Try pulling that commit, the FF08153 from Snoo. Try showing that commit.
Okay. FF68153F. Oh, there we go. All right. You know what? We're spelunking down a rabbit hole. It doesn't matter who wrote that.
Well, I thought it might have to do with why this feature was added. Was this feature?
Oh, fair.
But it doesn't. It's something else when it was reformatted.
Just out of curiosity, there are commits. So, I don't remember the trick for. Yeah, this is definitely an opinion, and yeah, we live with it. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen is if you can't use Concord, then you go ahead and write out those 3 lines of code.
Right, define it manually or something.
Yeah. So.
And then you're really going to feel the pain because you can't use your shortcut, which means when you have to spell it out longhand, the pain hurts even more, right?
Yes. Oh, look at this. Max number of objects. It's right there.
So you could edit that constant if you want to.
Yep. So bundle, is it bundle gem or bundle edit Anyway, yeah. So
well, I would just reassign the constant in your code, right?
yeah,
You could do that.
that would raise a warning, and it should,
Yeah,
right?
you can const remove it first and then reassign it
Oh, cool.
to dodge the warning.
Yeah.
So
So, all right.
this includes Adamantium, which I mentioned earlier. It's the library that they use for
Mhm.
it has to do, I believe, with immutable objects. So
Okay.
we'll try to avoid going into that because it's a rabbit hole. But
Yeah. Okay. All right. So basically, I guess what we're ready to do now is we're ready to look at the code of Concord and see how it's going to build an equalizer for us and build out the outer accessors for us.
it again
Which,
inherits from a module, which I
from module.
think is awesome.
Yep. Well, and that shows up in our code when we say concord.new and give it the list of names, and you can raise it, and that's where we throw out the error for that. We copy these off to. Now
Look at the equalizer trick. Equalizer is already defined, not knowing what values you're going to pass. So equalizer was defined on an array of names, and then the values that you pass, they become that array of names. Therefore, equalizer works because array. If you test equality on an array, it will by default check all of its members. So that's kind of a cheat way to filter it down to all the members that they don't know beforehand.
Wow. Okay, I am lost in that.
It's kind of a neat trick.
So now hang on. They're saying equalizer.new, but they're passing in the symbol names.
Right. So equalizer Concord objects are tested for equality based on one attribute. That one attribute is names. It's defined on line 17.
Mm-hmm.
And names is an array of the names you passed in for this Concord object. And in Ruby, if you do some array equal some other array, array will go through and test all the members of the array inside for equality. So they basically cheated and got all of the names you pass in as values. They're still all checked because they check arrays of those names.
So I wonder if that's the case, because on line 36 they're actually making a call to define equalizer, and they're actually doing a module send to include, and they're actually flattening out the names.
Okay, so sorry, two different things. My bad.
Okay.
One of them is the line you're showing right there is the actual what I expected to see. The names you pass in, they get splatted out in a call to equalizer. That's for the instances of this class.
Yeah.
But the earlier call we saw up on like line whatever 2 or so, the earlier call, this is how you compare classes built by Concord. The classes are equivalent if they involve the same set of names.
Ah, very cool.
Gotcha.
Okay. Oh, that's crazy. So you could have a position class with X, Y, and Z, and a speed class, or a velocity class with X, Y, and Z,
but they wouldn't compare equal because equalizer,
because they're base class name.
It uses the class name too.
Uses the class name as well. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. So, sorry, I'm all over the place here. Okay, so when we build this thing, we save off the names and the module, and then we define initialize. We build. Well, hang on. We define an initializer. That's kind of interesting. Readers and equalizer. Actually, no, this kind of makes sense. We're building out the new method, or the initialize method, the protected or public, if we're using the public submodule,
right?
Accessors for it, and then we are, blasting in the equalizer class.
Yeah.
My wife just came home, and I have a hard time stop here in just a few minutes, but I wonder if we can blast through some of this real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I'm feeling extra dumb now because I want to hurry, and this is really cool code. Okay, so this is our same. Oh, now that's interesting. So on line 33, we create an instance variable at module, and we assign just module.new to it. And
then that module gets included. My guess is the readers are going in that module.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason you would do this is the reason Josh made that commit to Rails way back when, that moved all of Active Records readers and stuff into a module, so that then you could define a method on top of them and super to get to them, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
So they're probably stuffing them in there to, that's my guess.
So when you're defining Equalizer, they're
putting
injecting
it in the module.
Yeah, they're putting it in the module. This is very polite code.
Right, it lets you override anything you want, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so readers is pretty much what I expected then, which is on this module, we're going to call add a reader, and then we make it protected. That totally makes sense. And I bet the public version of this class has the exact same thing, except for line 75 isn't there.
That would be my guess, yes.
Unless I'll be curious to see if they do that, or if they call this version and then
switch them to public.
Switch them back to public. That it's there and back again is not the same thing as never having left in the first place. But okay, so here's the initializer, and
this is initialized for your created class.
And
it takes some number of arguments. It checks to make sure it's the right size of arguments. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Because they're having to check the args manually, they go ahead and ape Ruby's error message, so that you'll get the same error if you pass the wrong number of arguments.
Yeah. So yeah, this is interesting. Ivars, which is the instance variable names, okay, zipped together with the arguments that were passed in on line 90.
Nice.
That is cool, and then we just iterate over each of them,
setting the appropriate instance variable.
Yeah. So zip takes a block.
Yeah, if you call the block version, it will call the block once each time through and handle it then. And the advantage of that one is it doesn't build the whole big array. So if you have like very big lists, and you don't want to make like another very big list, you can use the block version and handle them while you're iterating over them.
That is cool. So I would have been tempted to put the .each on here, and that I wonder if that implicitly would call 2A, and of course, we're trying to save memory.
Zip returns a array if you do not pass a block. So. Yeah. You would have gotten an array, and then you can do that, but it's a little bit wasteful because you build up an array of these pairs when you don't really need them. You just need to handle them as they come in. Yeah.
That's fair. And we need to save on execution time here, because this array of args, as we know from earlier in the file, could be as large as 3.
Ouch!
Zing! Okay, so all right. Now that's very cool. I didn't know about the zip block method. That is cool. All right, so instance variable names. Okay, so
puts the funny @ symbol in front of them.
Okay, and then here's our public. They use the original code, and then they lock back off.
Yeah, make them public again. I love the way it made an anonymous module. And it ended up doing all its work in the anonymous module. So then you can define your methods normally in the class. You can super up to their methods and change whatever you want. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is really slick. That is really, really slick. So now you've been talking about ROM, and you mentioned that Adamantium is a bit of a a rat hole, but not a rat hole, a rabbit hole to go down. There's a there's a pejorative difference between rat hole and rabbit hole in code. And what are these? Are these parts of adamantium? Is that the project I want to look at for the larger scope of this?
Adamantium is another project that's a part of ROM, like Concord and Equalizer. They basically, so they took a really neat approach to building out ROM and just kind of built this ecosystem of little libraries that, you know, put together the way they want. And these, we're looking now at some of the lower rungs of that ecosystem. You know,
yeah.
Before we get into things like the SQL engine and stuff like that, which obviously is crazy more complicated.
Right. Right. That is very cool.
Yeah, it's neat stuff. I'm actually glad we looked at these libraries because there were some cool tricks in there, and it was neat to see how they did things.
That was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
That's awesome.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's just a sign that you're way too geeky.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I saw a pretty good pretty good comment on the oatmeal about how to tell the difference between geeks and non-geeks, and it's PG-13, so we'll skip it. But, theoatmeal.com, kids. Actually, it's just read the biography of Nikola Tesla. It's actually embedded near the bottom of that comic. So
awesome.
So
well, very cool. Thank you very much for choosing
this
blowing afternoon with me.
Dude, this rocked.
It was fun.
I want to do this again. This was fun.
I agree. Good idea, Saran. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Saran. This was very cool. So, I guess we're at a good stopping point then.
Yeah, let's go. Okay. I should go eat dinner.
Yes, it is hungry time. So.
All right. Thank you very much. I will see you soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.